Listen carefully, because this might challenge something you've believed your entire life, and that's exactly why it matters. Imagine yourself standing by the ocean, not rushing, not chasing anything, just standing there as the waves move in and out, endlessly, quietly, without effort. And in that moment, something shifts. You start to notice your breath, your body, maybe the subtle weight of time behind you. Years lived, experiences carried, a quiet awareness that things have changed. But then you notice something else. The ocean hasn't aged. The sky hasn't grown old. The wind carries no memory of yesterday. And suddenly a strange question appears. Who exactly is growing old? Because we've been taught that aging means decline, that it's a slow movement from strength to weakness, from clarity to confusion, from being fully alive to slowly fading away. But what if that's not the full picture? What if aging isn't something breaking down, but something opening up? When you're younger, life feels like a straight path. You're moving towards something, a future, a goal, a version of yourself that finally feels complete. So you push forward. You chase. You hold tightly to time as if it belongs to you. But then something subtle begins to change. Not all at once, but gradually. The future you were chasing never actually arrives. It just becomes the present, and then disappears again. And again. And again. And here's where the misunderstanding begins. Because we think what's slipping away is life itself. But what's actually slipping away is the illusion that life was ever something you could hold. As you grow older, time seems to speed up. Days feel shorter. Years pass faster. And it can feel like something is being taken from you. But what if nothing is being taken at all? What if something is being revealed? Because the faster time appears to move, the clearer it becomes that it was never standing still. It was never yours to control. It was always moving, always flowing. And here's the paradox. The more you try to hold on to time, the faster it slips through your fingers. But the moment you stop trying, something softens. There's a lightness, as if you're no longer being dragged by time, but moving with it. Now here's where things get interesting. Some people grow older and become softer. Not weaker, softer. More at ease. More present. As if they've stopped arguing with life. And others do the opposite. They tighten. They resist. They cling to who they used to be, trying to preserve something that was never meant to stay the same. And the difference between these two paths? It's not age. It's not health. It's not luck. It's one thing: the willingness to let go. And let's be clear, letting go doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean becoming passive or indifferent. It means something much deeper. It means no longer insisting that life follow your expectations. No longer demanding that time move at your pace. It means allowing things to be exactly as they are. And when that happens, something remarkable appears. You realize you're still here, not as the identity you built, not as the version of yourself you've been trying to maintain, but as something far more immediate. The awareness that sees everything changing. The presence behind every experience. And this doesn't age. The body changes. The mind shifts. Memories come and go. But this awareness remains. Quiet. Steady. Untouched. Like the sky behind moving clouds. Always there. And when you begin to see this clearly, aging starts to feel very different, because it's no longer just a physical process. It becomes a kind of awakening, a gradual realization that what you are is not limited to what is changing. And this changes how you see the body itself. Because most of your life, you've treated your body like something you own, something you control. But over time, that illusion begins to crack. The body slows down. It aches. It doesn't respond the way it used to. And that can feel unsettling, like something is being taken from you. But what if the body was never something you owned? What if it was always something you were participating in? Like a wave in the ocean. A wave rises, forms, and falls back into the sea. And we don't call that failure. We understand it was never separate from the ocean to begin with. And in the same way, the body is not a fixed object. It's a process, always changing, always moving. And when you stop resisting that change, when you stop comparing yourself to who you used to be, something shifts. Life becomes less about control and more about awareness. You begin to notice more, feel more, experience more deeply, not despite aging, but because of it. And the same is true for memory. Because as you grow older, memory changes. Details fade. Names slip. Moments blur. And it can feel like you're losing yourself. But here's the truth. Memory is not the past. It's a story being told in the present. And even when that story fades, something remains. You are still here, aware, present, alive. In fact, as memory softens, the present often becomes more vivid, more immediate, more real. Because life has never existed in memory. It has always existed here, now. And beneath all of this, there is a deeper question, the one we rarely say out loud. What happens when it all ends? Because underneath the fear of aging, there is often a fear of disappearance, of losing everything. But even this begins to shift when you look closely, because you have never experienced anything outside of the present moment, not even once. The past is a memory now. The future is an idea now. Everything happens here. So the idea of an end exists only as a thought, not as something you've ever directly known. And maybe what we call an ending is simply a change of form, like a wave returning to the ocean. Nothing truly lost, just transformed. And when this is seen, even slightly, the fear begins to loosen. Not because you found an answer, but because the question no longer feels the same. And as this understanding deepens, something else changes. Your relationship with life and with other people. Because relationships begin to feel less like something you need to hold on to, and more like something you experience moment by moment. There's less pressure, less expectation, more presence, more honesty. You stop trying to control how things unfold and start appreciating them as they are. And in that, something beautiful emerges, a kind of quiet connection, not based on need, but on shared existence, just being here, together. And as this continues, even your sense of meaning begins to shift, because for most of your life, meaning was something you chased, something you tried to build through achievement, success, progress. But over time, that starts to feel less convincing, not because life becomes meaningless, but because you begin to see meaning was never something you had to find. It was always here, in the simplest moments, the light, the silence, the breath, the feeling of being alive. And when you stop searching, you start noticing. And what you notice is that nothing is missing. And then, something even deeper happens. You begin to see that nothing in your life was out of place. Not your mistakes, not your struggles, not your confusion. It was all part of the same unfolding, not separate events, but movements within a whole. And in that realization, there is a release. You no longer need to hold everything together. You no longer need your life to make perfect sense. Because you see, life was never a problem to solve. It was always complete, in each moment. And so now, if you sit quietly, just for a moment, you might begin to sense something subtle. That what you are is not separate from what you see. That the same movement that carries everything forward is the same movement that you are. And in that, there is nothing to hold on to, nothing to push away, nothing to become. There is only this, just this moment, exactly as it is, and within it, a quiet presence, steady, unchanging, always here. And maybe, just maybe, that has been you all along. And if you stay with this a little longer, something even deeper begins to reveal itself, because what we are really talking about here is not just aging, not just time, but something much more subtle, something we rarely look at directly, and that is the quiet fear that sits underneath all of this, the fear of no longer existing, the fear that one day everything you know, everything you remember, everything you call me will simply stop. And this fear does not usually appear clearly. It hides behind other thoughts, behind concerns about health, about memory, about losing control. But if you look closely, if you stay with it without turning away, you begin to notice that what you are really afraid of is not pain, not change, but disappearance itself, the idea that you might become nothing. But here is something worth seeing very carefully, because this fear is built on an assumption so familiar that we rarely question it. And that assumption is that you are something fixed, something solid, something that exists as a separate entity moving through time toward an ending. And if that were true, then yes, the fear would make sense, because something fixed can be lost, something separate can disappear. But what if that assumption is not accurate? What if what you call you has never been something fixed in the first place? Because if you look at your own experience, you will notice that everything about you is changing. Your thoughts change, your emotions shift, your body transforms, your memories come and go. Even your sense of identity is not the same as it was 10 years ago, or even yesterday, and yet something remains, something that is aware of all these changes, something that is present through all of them. And this is where things begin to open up in a way that is difficult to describe but very simple to notice, because this awareness that sees change, that experiences time, is not itself changing in the same way. It does not age in the way the body ages. It does not come and go in the way thoughts and memories do. It is simply present, always here, always now. And if this is so, then the fear of disappearing begins to lose its foundation, because what you are at the deepest level is not something that moves through time toward an end, but the very space in which time appears. And this is not something to believe, it is something to observe directly, because right now, as you are listening, you are aware, and that awareness is not something you created, it is not something you have to maintain, it is simply here. Thoughts may come and go, sensations may change, but this basic fact of being aware remains constant. And when you begin to rest in that, even for a moment, something softens in a very profound way, because the need to hold everything together begins to fade, the urgency to protect a fixed identity begins to loosen, and in its place there is a kind of openness, a quiet trust in the unfolding of life. This does not mean that fear disappears completely, or that you suddenly understand everything, but it does mean that the fear no longer has the same grip. It is seen for what it is, a thought, a projection, something that arises within awareness but does not define it. And this changes how you experience everything else, because when you are no longer holding on to the idea that you must preserve a fixed version of yourself, life becomes less about defending and more about experiencing, less about controlling and more about participating. You begin to notice that each moment stands on its own, complete in itself, not needing to lead anywhere, not needing to be part of a larger story in order to have meaning. And in that, there is a kind of freedom that is very quiet but very real, a freedom from the constant pressure to become something, to arrive somewhere, to secure a future that never quite comes. And this freedom does not remove you from life, it brings you closer to it, because when you are no longer preoccupied with what comes next, you are able to fully experience what is here, the texture of the moment, the subtle details that were always present but often overlooked. You may notice the way your breath moves, the way sound appears and fades, the way thoughts arise without effort and pass just as easily. And in noticing this, you begin to see that life is not something happening to you, it is something happening as you, something you are inseparable from. And this is where the sense of separation begins to soften, because the boundary between you and everything else becomes less clear, not in a confusing way, but in a very simple, direct way, like realizing that the wave is not separate from the ocean. And when this is seen, even briefly, the idea of holding on to life begins to feel unnecessary, because you are not something that can step outside of it in the first place. And so the question shifts from how do I hold on to life, to what is life when I am no longer trying to hold on to it. And in that shift, something very ordinary but very profound becomes visible, that life, exactly as it is, in this moment, is already complete. Not perfect in the way we imagine perfection, not free from change or uncertainty, but complete in the sense that nothing is missing from it, nothing needs to be added for it to be what it is. And this completeness is not something you create, it is something you notice when the constant effort to improve or secure experience begins to relax. And so, if you allow yourself to rest here, even briefly, without trying to reach a conclusion, without trying to turn this into something you can use or apply, you may begin to sense a different kind of stillness, not the absence of movement, but a stillness within movement, a quiet presence that remains even as everything changes. And this presence is not separate from you. It is what you are before any description, before any identity, before any story about who you have been or who you will become. And in recognizing this, even faintly, something shifts in a way that cannot be fully explained, a kind of easing, as though a tension you did not realize you were carrying has quietly fallen away. And from here, life continues exactly as before. The body moves, the mind thinks, time passes, but the relationship to all of it is different, lighter, less burdened, more open. And perhaps this is what growing older is really offering, not a loss of what you were, but an opportunity to see more clearly what you have always been, something that does not depend on time, something that does not come and go, something that remains quietly present through every change. And when this is seen, even for a moment, the whole experience of aging begins to transform, not into something to fear, but into something to understand, something to explore, something that, in its own quiet way, reveals the deeper nature of what it means to be alive.